Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. This week, the media and mythology. Jessica Lynch, Pat Tillman, and Pentagon propaganda. Gaza's internet cafes under attack. The question is, why? And when the mission goes from accomplished to impossible, 4 more years of war. Welcome back to The Listening Post, where we put propaganda to the test. Jessica Lynch and Pat Tillman were 2 of the biggest names in the Bush administration's so-called war on terror. Private Lynch was the woman cast as a heroine after her capture and release in Iraq. They even made a movie about her. Tillman traded in his career in American football for an army uniform and a stint in Afghanistan that cost him his life. In both cases, the U.S. military lied about their stories, and the full details of that propaganda effort have now come to light. In this week's News Divide, we look at what U.S. media said then about the stories versus what they're saying now. And we ask the question, have the media learned their lesson?
Still here with you, Jessica.
Make sure we get a good count, guys, as she comes in.
So 3-0.
These are the images the Pentagon showed the world in 2003 of the rescue of Private Jessica Lynch. And this is what we were told about her.
Hard as nails. That's what they're saying about Private First Class Jessica Lynch.
She shot until she ran out of ammunition.
Recently, a new, longer version of the rescue tape surfaced on the internet. It showed a young American traumatized in her hospital bed, shaken by the sound of distant gunfire.
It's okay, it's okay. You know?
Jessica Lynch never claimed to be the hero the U.S. media described her as.
At my parents' home in Wirt County, West Virginia, it was understaged by media, all repeating the story of the little girl Rambo from the hills of West Virginia who went down fighting. It was not true.
1 year after the Lynch rescue, Pat Tillman was killed in Afghanistan. The U.S. military said he was shot by Taliban fighters. That's the way the story was reported, and the death of the football player who gave up millions to join the so-called war on terror was huge news in America.
At his memorial service in 2004, which was televised live from coast to coast, Pat Tillman was honored for giving his life for his country.
There was one small problem with the narrative, however. It was utter fiction.
Tillman's brother Kevin and his family later learned he was killed by friendly fire, mistakenly shot by his comrades. It was April 2004. The Abu Ghraib story was breaking. The war in Iraq was not going well.
Revealing that Pat's death was a fratricide would have been yet another political disaster during a month already swollen with political disasters, and the brutal truth that the American public would undoubtedly find unacceptable. So the facts needed to be suppressed. An alternative narrative had to be constructed. This freshly manufactured narrative was then distributed to the American public. And we believe the strategy had the intended effect. It shifted the focus from the grotesque torture at Abu Ghraib and a downward spiral of an illegal act of aggression to a great American who died a hero's death.
Jessica Lynch and the Tillman family told their stories to a U.S. Congress now controlled by a Democratic Party that is eager to make the Bush administration look bad. And the U.S. media, which for the most part had initially reported the Lynch and Tillman stories the way the Pentagon had wanted, now had to report the real stories.
The Pentagon is under fire for concocting stories about 2 war heroes, Jessica Lynch and former football player Pat Tillman.
In that extraordinary hearing on Capitol Hill, lawmakers heard testimony that the Army lied about Pat Tillman's death to create a badly needed hero, just as the war in Iraq turned ugly.
Tillman's mother said the military let him down. In the way the military reported or misreported this story, they let all of us down.
When U.S. news companies covered the hearings, they were tougher on the Pentagon and their industry rivals than they were on themselves. ABC News used file clips of how Fox and CBS got the story wrong, but chose not to go into its own library to show how ABC had done the same. And there was an absence of critical media self-examination in the coverage on how U.S. news organizations had swallowed the Pentagon's spin, particularly on the Lynch story, when there was growing evidence that it wasn't true. Within a month of Private Lynch's rescue, Mitch Potter of the Toronto Star newspaper was in Nasiriyah, where he concluded that tales of Lynch being abused in the hospital were clearly untrue.
They weren't speaking in myth, they were speaking in specifics. The clincher for me was when I spoke to the day nurse that looked after Jessica day in and day out, because she burst into tears when we informed her of the way that story had played out around the world. She burst into tears. She was devastated at the thought that anybody would think that she had any hand in mistreatment of Jessica Lynch. And I believed her.
Potter's paper published the real story, but there was little follow-up in the U.S. media. And 6 months later, NBC, which didn't let the facts get in the way of a good made-for-television movie, aired Saving Jessica Lynch. The film attracted almost 15 million viewers, far more than any U.S. news broadcast can claim.
The facts were being buried by the myth. You know, the myth was winning. And I think probably if you did a straw poll in the United States today, you would probably have well over half the people you talk to, maybe as many as 9 out of 10, describing the myth of the freedom of Jessica Lynch as was originally reported before we got to the Iraqi doctors.
Jessica Lynch and Pat Tillman, foot soldiers in a propaganda war in which the media provided close, on-air support. The U.S. military's strategy on these stories and the way the media were played is the kind of stuff our Global Village voices like to get their teeth into.
Simply put, heroism sells in America. Whether it's Pat Tillman versus the Taliban, Iraqi Balboa versus the Soviet Union, stories of the strong and brave sell well to the American public, even more so post 9/11. There's a vast difference, however, between embracing stories of heroism and the U.S. military purposely concocting stories of propaganda to disseminate across the U.S. mainstream media. It's absolutely despicable to think that the U.S. military would use its servicemen and women as propaganda tools in the Iraq and Afghanistan PR campaign, as was the case with Jessica Lynch and Pat Tillman. The media, for its part, has been all too willing to go along for the ride. If the U.S. media spent as much time checking the accuracy of their pieces as they did sensationalizing them, there would be good reason to believe that the U.S. media was actually trying to bring the real and unfiltered news to the public.
Sure, the people were deceived, but it's not the viewers whose name is, whose reputation is on the line right now. It's the papers, the radio stations, and the TV anchors, and the hasty producers at NBC who turned Jessica Lynch's story into this really crappy movie, and somehow retrospectively, because of the lies that just transpired, it's an even crappier movie, and anyone who has seen that movie, Saving Jessica Lynch, will know what I'm talking about. But if any good comes out of this, it's the shame on the media for swallowing what's served to them by their government, and maybe now they'll chew on things a little longer before they regurgitate it into our living rooms. But first, I think they need to get mad, and I think that they have every right to be mad.
Why am I not surprised that they lied to us about Jessica Lynch? Why am I not surprised that we lied about the circumstances of the death of Pat Tillman, the Arizona Cardinals football star who gave up his career to go to fight the terrorists? He was used as a motivator for American rah-rah to support the war. They know that the war in Iraq is immoral. It was never justified. And they know that as long as they can keep the American people on the edge of fear and emotion and concern that terrorists are under every rock, that they can do whatever they want in the world. It's a tragedy. I'm disgusted by it. Are you?
If you have issues with the news media and would like to be one of our Global Village voices, email us at listeningpost@aljazeera.net. We'll run you through the technology and add your voice to the mix. Lots to cover in our fast food section today. Listening Post News Bites. Two of the best-known voices in the Arab blogosphere are about to be silenced. Riverbend is the name an Iraqi woman used on her Baghdad Burning blog, which many foreign reporters relied on in their coverage of the Iraq War. She recently wrote that she and her family are leaving Iraq. There are moments, she wrote, when the injustice of having to leave your country simply because an imbecile got it into his head to invade it is overwhelming. And one of Egypt's best-known bloggers, Sand Monkey, is also packing it in. In his farewell message, he said that after the jailing of a fellow blogger in Egypt, he fears that state security is closing in on him and that his anonymity was about to be blown. Sand Monkey is a well-known critic of Egypt's repression of political voices, and the closing of his site was widely reported by Arab media. Conservative Christians in the U.S. have come up with their answer to YouTube. GodTube is set to launch later this year. The religious file-sharing site will provide user-generated sermons and music videos with Christian content.
I like big balls and I cannot lie. You Christian brothers can't deny that when a girl walks in with a KJV and a bookmark in Proverbs, you get stoked. Got a name engraved so you know this girl is saved. It looks like one of those large ones with plenty of space in the margins. Oh baby, I want to read with ya, cause your Bible's got pictures. My minister tried to console me, but that book you got makes me so holy.
GodTube is in its test phases, but the people behind it say it's already getting about 50,000 hits a day, and we trust they wouldn't bear false witness about their internet traffic figures. This is the stage of the broadcast where we often look at state-run television. Now, to be fair, Fox News does not exactly fall into that category, but we do know it's Vice President Cheney's channel of choice. Recently, Fox's morning show focused on a story from the state of Maine where a group of Somali Muslim students were taunted by other students who put a ham steak in front of them. The students complained that the mocking of their religion amounted to a hate crime. So far, so accurate. But the story was then spoofed by a comedy website who invented stuff about the school implementing an anti-ham response plan. Fox was a bit slow on the uptake and reported the new fictional details as fact, poked fun at the students when the joke was really on the news network.
But he says placing a ham sandwich in front of a Muslim is an extraordinarily hurtful, degrading thing. They probably felt like they were back in Mogadishu starving and being shot at. I thought this was a joke.
So many people are typing in saying, you're making this story up, right? No, we're not making it up. We'll tell you all about it in just a moment.
You know, I hope we're not being duped.
We're back after the break. What is going on in Gaza with the attacks on the internet cafes?